Humanity had always been drawn to the unknown, to the distant stars that beckoned with their uncharted territories and secrets buried in the cosmic dark. It was the natural curiosity of a species that had evolved from scattered tribes to a global civilization and now an interstellar one. It was this very curiosity that propelled them out of Earth's atmosphere and beyond, into the void. And it was this same curiosity that would lead to the discovery of a power greater than any they had ever known. Dr. Evelyn Hayes stood in front of a massive console, her fingers poised over the hollow keyboard, navigating through data streams at lightning speed. Her dark eyes, focused and intense, flickered across the streams, each number, each symbol, a step closer to unraveling a mystery centuries in the making. This was her life's work, finding and understanding the relics of the Titans. The Titans were an ancient, almost mythical species. Their civilization had been wiped out millennia ago, leaving behind only their creations, artifacts of unimaginable power. Some believed they were gods, others claimed they were the architects of the stars themselves. Humanity had discovered the first Titan relics during the early years of space colonization, but none of those discoveries had prepared them for what they had uncovered now. Evelyn was aboard the Prometheus, a vessel tasked with exploring the far reaches of a galaxy thought to be a graveyard of Titan remnants. The ship had already made several successful landings on ancient Titan worlds, unearthing strange technologies and forgotten knowledge, but nothing compared to the find on Titan IX. A massive structure buried deep beneath the ice of an uninhabited planet had revealed itself in a series of seismic readings. The Prometheus had been the first to investigate. At first, it had seemed like just another ruin, another piece of Titan architecture, another dead end. But as Evelyn and her team dug deeper, they uncovered something extraordinary. A weapon, a relic far more powerful than anything humanity had encountered before. The Titan's Wrath, as they had named it, was an ancient war machine, its design incomprehensible, its purpose far beyond any terrestrial military technology. It was a relic of destruction, of power, and of a forgotten civilization that had once wielded it to protect or perhaps dominate the galaxy. But that was before the power core had been accidentally activated. The first sign that something was wrong had been the sudden surge of energy. The lights aboard the Prometheus flickered, and the ship's systems hummed with an unfamiliar intensity. Evelyn had been the first to notice the signal, a signal that was not supposed to be there, emanating from the depths of Titan IX's ice-covered surface. It was a distress beacon, though not for anyone who still lived. The Prometheus had been following the signal for weeks, deciphering it piece by piece, until they finally pinpointed its source. The weapon's activation had done something far worse than they could have imagined. It had broadcast a message that echoed through the fabric of space, and the moment that message reached its intended destination, an alien armada had appeared. It was impossible. It shouldn't have been possible. The Prometheus wasn't prepared for this. They had made a great discovery, yes, but they hadn't known the stakes. They hadn't known what it would mean to awaken something so ancient, so dangerous. A Titan's war machine was not meant to be a relic. It was meant to be a warning that no one, not even the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, could ignore. Evelyn stared at the console in front of her, her heart pounding in her chest. The incoming fleet was massive, countless ships stretching across the galaxy, their energy signatures unmistakable. These were not just any alien ships. They were the remains of the Titan's enemies, those who had once fought and lost against them. They had survived, adapted, and now they had returned, drawn to the power of the weapon buried beneath Titan IX. Her mind raced as the weight of the situation settled over her. This wasn't just a relic anymore. It was a beacon, and now it was calling for them. Humanity had just made the most dangerous discovery in history, and now they would have to face the consequences. But Evelyn wasn't sure what the right move was. Do they activate the weapon again and risk becoming the target of an unimaginable enemy? Or do they shut it down, potentially losing the only chance they had to defend themselves? The choices before her were endless, but the clock was ticking, and the armada was getting closer. As Evelyn surveyed the battlefield of possibilities, The magnitude of their discovery seemed to hang in the balance. But no one had told her what to do when the power she had uncovered could destroy entire star systems. Her fingers hovered above the console again, her breath shallow, as she was forced to face a brutal truth. Humanity had awakened a beast, and it had no mercy. The Prometheus drifted silently through the darkness of space, a fragile lifeline suspended among the stars. Evelyn felt the weight of the moment as the countdown ticked away on the console, in front of her. The armada was coming, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. It was a simple truth, one that gnawed at her insides. The Titan's wrath had been activated, its signal sent out into the vastness of space like a beacon, and now they were paying the price. She had tried to warn them. She had argued with the ship's captain, Commander Arlen Pierce, until her throat ached. The rest of the crew had been split. Some believed the weapon could be used as a defense, a shield for humanity against whatever the armada would bring. Others, like Evelyn, feared its potential, a power that could obliterate entire fleets in seconds. The Titan's wrath was no mere artifact. It was a weapon of annihilation. There was no telling what horrors it could unleash once fully activated. But Evelyn hadn't anticipated the scale of the threat. She had never imagined the sheer number of ships that would answer the call. The alien armada, once thought to be an ancient myth, a remnant of the Titanian War, was real, and it was moving toward them with terrifying speed. Evelyn had seen their signal on the scanner just hours before, a massive, coordinated fleet of warships stretching across light years. They were coming for the weapon, and they were coming for humanity. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, humanity had no choice but to stand its ground. There was no way to flee. The Prometheus was caught in the crossfire, its options dwindling as the alien ships neared. Evelyn knew that even if they could escape, they would never outrun the consequences of their actions. The weapon was too powerful, its allure too dangerous. If it fell into the wrong hands, the galaxy could be torn apart. It was humanity's burden to bear, but she could not help but wonder if they were even ready for it. Pierce had given the order to prepare for the worst. All hands to battle stations. His voice echoed through the comm system, steady yet laced with a tension that betrayed his stoic demeanor. But Evelyn's mind was elsewhere, lost in the rapid flow of data streaming before her eyes. She had spent countless hours researching the Titanian language, the symbols carved into the weapon's core, the cryptic messages embedded within its circuitry. But it was all just a puzzle, a collection of fragmented pieces. She had never expected to uncover a weapon of this magnitude. She ran her fingers over the console again, checking the weapon's systems. The pulse generators were stable, the energy output escalating at an alarming rate. The Titan's wrath was responding to the approaching fleet, almost as though it could sense the imminent threat. It was adapting, its dormant systems slowly coming to life, preparing for battle. "Evelyn?" Commander Pierce's voice crackled through the comms. She looked up to see the captain standing in the doorway of the bridge, his face grim. "Are we ready?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She could feel the weight of the weapon's power pressing down on her, the realization that there was no going back. It was too late to shut it down now. The weapon was alive, and it was calling out to the armada. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice strained. It's responding. We can't control it. At least not in the way we thought we could. The energy levels are rising faster than I can process." Pierce nodded, his jaw set. "We don't have much time. We need to make a decision." The decision, humanity's survival, hung in the balance, and the cost was more than Evelyn could bear. The weapon had the potential to turn the tide, but it could also destroy them all. She felt a deep unease settle in her chest, a sickening feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. The weapon's power was too great, and they were too small, too fragile to wield it without consequences. "Wait," Evelyn said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "The signal, it's changing. It's not just responding to the fleet, it's targeting them." Her heart skipped a beat. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The weapon, this ancient machine of destruction, wasn't just awaiting orders. It had its own agenda. It wasn't just defending itself. It was seeking retribution. "Get the fleet on screen," Pierce ordered, his voice urgent now. Evelyn turned to the main viewport, her fingers flying over the controls. The image that appeared on the screen was like something out of a nightmare. The armada was vast, its ships a cold and calculating array of war machines. But what struck her most was the precision of their formation. They were not just a fleet. They were a collective, an army driven by purpose and intent. They were here to reclaim what they believed was theirs. The Titan's wrath had made its presence known, and in response, the alien fleet moved like a predatory creature drawn to its prey. But Evelyn now understood something far darker than she had anticipated. The fleet was not merely responding to the relic's signal. They were here to destroy it. They had come to eliminate humanity, to erase the threat before it could rise to power. Her hands shook as she processed the data in front of her. There was no question now. The armada wasn't just after the weapon. They had come to wipe out humanity. "They're coming in fast," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "They'll be here in hours, maybe less." Pierce's face darkened. "What's our plan then? We fight?" Evelyn's mind raced, but it was clear now that there was no way to fight this. The armada was far too powerful, and the Titan's wrath wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of nature, something beyond human comprehension. Even if they managed to activate it fully, the consequences would be catastrophic. The weapon could destroy the fleet, yes, but at what cost? What would become of humanity if they used such power? "There's no time left," Evelyn said softly, almost to herself. "We have to shut it down." But as the words left her mouth, the ship jolted. The console in front of her flared to life, a warning light blinking rapidly. The Titan's wrath was responding once again, but this time, there was no hesitation, no retreat. It was time. And Evelyn realized with a sinking heart that there was no turning back. The Prometheus trembled, its hull groaning under the force of the Titan's wrath's awakening. Evelyn gripped the console, her fingers turning white, as she fought to keep the ship steady. The energy readings were escalating beyond anything she had anticipated. She could feel it now, like the ship itself was a vessel caught in a storm being pulled toward a gravitational center far more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. "We can't keep up with this," Evelyn muttered, watching the screen as the weapon's energy pulses grew stronger. Each pulse sent a ripple across the ship's systems, each wave of energy pushing the ship closer to the edge of catastrophic failure. Commander Pierce stood beside her, his eyes scanning the data in front of him. "Shut it down, Evelyn. You have to stop it before we're all dead." Evelyn hesitated. She could already hear the hum of the weapon's core, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the ship's very structure. It was no longer just an object to study. It had become an entity, alive with purpose, and that purpose seemed to be drawing in the alien fleet like moths to a flame. "Shutting it down isn't an option anymore," Evelyn said, voice tight with fear. "The moment it activated, it sent a signal across the stars. We can't stop that, not now, but we can try to control it. We just need time." Pierce's jaw clenched. He knew the implications. The longer they tried to control the Titan's wrath, the greater the risk of it spiraling out of control. But they had no choice. The armada was still out there, and their only hope now was to understand the weapon, even if it meant playing a dangerous game. "We're going to have to fight," Pierce said grimly, turning away from the console. "Prepare the crew. Everyone to battle stations." The crew scrambled, the urgency of the order echoing through the ship. Evelyn watched them move, knowing that no amount of preparation could change the fundamental truth they were facing. The armada was coming. They had no hope of fighting it. No chance at survival if they couldn't control the weapon they had just unleashed. As the crew took their positions, Evelyn remained at the console, her mind racing. She had never imagined that a discovery so beautiful, so grand, could be this dangerous. The weapon had been dormant for millennia, but now, activated, it was responding to the call of the fleet. It wasn't just a relic of war. It was a weapon of mass destruction, one designed to protect its creators from the very kind of enemy that was now closing in. She had hoped for a clean solution, for some way to deactivate the weapon without triggering its destructive power. But she now realized that there was no such solution. The Titan's wrath had its own agenda, and humanity had become part of that agenda. "I don't think the fleet's here for the weapon, Pierce," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice low and strained. "They're not just after the power. They're after us." Pierce turned to her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Evelyn's hands moved quickly over the console, bringing up the fleet's trajectory, its movements and its proximity to their position. "Look at this. They're in a perfect formation, but they're not just targeting the weapon, they're surrounding us. They know we're the ones who activated it. They've come for humanity." A cold shiver ran down Pierce's spine as he processed the information. "We've become a target," he whispered, his voice sharp with realization. "They didn't just come to reclaim the weapon. They came to wipe us out." Evelyn felt a pit open up in her stomach. She had been so focused on the weapon, on controlling its power, that she had ignored the greater threat. The fleet wasn't after the weapon as a tool, it was after it as a symbol of humanity's hubris. To them, the Titan's wrath was an affront. It was a reminder that humanity was attempting to harness power that belonged to a far more advanced civilization, and they would not allow that. The moment stretched into an eternity. The alien armada was not just a threat, it was a consequence of humanity's actions. The fleet was a reminder of what happened when a species overstepped its bounds, when it reached too far into the unknown. And now humanity had to pay the price. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to destroy us," Pierce said, his voice growing harder. "We need to do something." Evelyn nodded, her mind working in overdrive. "There's one more option, but it's risky." She hesitated, her thoughts darkening as she voiced the idea that had been forming in the back of her mind. "If we can overload the Titan's wrath, push it to the point of critical failure, we could destroy the armada. But it would take everything. The Prometheus would be gone. All of us." Pierce's expression tightened. "You're suggesting we sacrifice the ship and crew just to take out the armada?" "It's the only way," Evelyn replied, her voice almost hollow. "The weapon has been dormant for millennia. It's not designed for our kind to control, and now we've activated it. It's choosing its own path. We can't just turn it off. We need to unleash it. Completely." Pierce considered the plan for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. "If it means saving humanity, then we do it." Evelyn swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They had no choice. The armada was coming and there was no time left. She could only hope that humanity's will to survive was stronger than the weapon they had unleashed. But even as the crew moved to execute the plan, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing right into the hands of a force far greater than they could ever understand. The Titan's wrath was no mere weapon. It was a relic of a civilization that had destroyed itself through its own ambition. And now humanity was standing on the precipice of repeating that same mistake. "We're going to do this," Pierce said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Get the weapon ready." The crew worked quickly, setting the final stages of their plan into motion. But as the countdown began, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder, what would be left of humanity if they succeeded? Would they be remembered as heroes, or as a species that had gone too far, reached too high and paid the price for their ambition? The weapon was ready. The countdown had begun. And as the first wave of the alien fleet emerged from the darkness, Evelyn felt a chill grip her heart. The battle for humanity's future had begun. The air aboard the Prometheus was thick with tension, the sound of rapid breathing and frantic footsteps filling the dimly lit corridors. The crew had gathered in the war room, their eyes fixed on the central display where the vast, menacing form of the alien armada loomed larger by the second. Every ship, every vessel was a harbinger of destruction, but none were as dangerous as the Titan's wrath, the weapon humanity had unlocked and now had no choice but to unleash. Evelyn stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the hum of machinery, her hands shaking as she inputted final commands into the console. Her mind was numb, focused solely on the task at hand. This was it. There was no turning back. Behind her, Pierce stood silently, watching as the countdown clock ticked down relentlessly. The ship was already close to critical mass, the energy signatures from the Titan's wrath growing exponentially. The weapon was alive now, thrumming with untapped power, but Evelyn knew that unleashing its full potential would mean the end of everything they knew, the Prometheus, its crew, and possibly even their future as a species. But it was their only hope. "Ready to fire," Evelyn said softly, though her voice was barely audible over the rising hum of the weapon's core. The armada was close. Too close. On the screen, their formations were almost perfect, a calculated precision that spoke of a strategy, as old as time itself. Take down the threat before it could reach its full potential. And humanity was that threat. "We've only got one shot," Pierce muttered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Once we fire this thing, we're committed. The Prometheus won't survive the backlash." Evelyn turned to face him. Her eyes, dark with exhaustion and fear, held his gaze for a long moment. "I know. But if we don't do this, they'll destroy us all." Pierce nodded, his face set in grim determination. "Do it." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the controls. The weight of the decision, they came to wipe us out. Evelyn felt a pit open up in her stomach. She had been so focused on the weapon, on controlling its power, that she had ignored the greater threat. The fleet wasn't after the weapon as a tool, it was after it as a symbol of humanity's hubris. To them, the Titan's wrath was an affront. It was a reminder that humanity was attempting to harness power that belonged to a far more advanced civilization, and they would not allow that. The moment stretched into an eternity. The alien armada was not just a threat. It was a consequence of humanity's actions. The fleet was a reminder of what happened when a species overstepped its bounds, when it reached too far into the unknown. And now, humanity had to pay the price. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to destroy us," Pierce said, his voice growing harder. "We need to do something." Evelyn nodded, her mind working in overdrive. "There's one more option, but it's risky." She hesitated, her thoughts darkening as she voiced the idea that had been forming in the back of her mind. "If we can overload the Titan's wrath, push it to the point of critical failure, we could destroy the armada. But it would take everything. The Prometheus would be gone. All of us." Pierce's expression tightened. "You're suggesting we sacrifice the ship and crew just to take out the armada?" "It's the only way," Evelyn replied, her voice almost hollow. "The weapon has been dormant for millennia. It's not designed for our kind to control, and now we've activated it. It's choosing its own path. We can't just turn it off. We need to unleash it, completely." Pierce considered the plan for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. "If it means saving humanity, then we do it." Evelyn swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. They had no choice. The armada was coming and there was no time left. She could only hope that humanity's will to survive was stronger than the weapon they had unleashed. But even as the crew moved to execute the plan, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing right into the hands of a force far greater than they could ever understand. The Titan's wrath was no mere weapon. It was a relic of a civilization that had destroyed itself through its own ambition. And now humanity was standing on the precipice of repeating that same mistake. "We're going to do this," Pierce said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Get the weapon ready." The crew worked quickly, setting the final stages of their plan into motion. But as the countdown began, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder, what would be left of humanity if they succeeded? Would they be remembered as heroes, or as a species that had gone too far, reached too high, and paid the price for their ambition? The weapon was ready. The countdown had begun. And as the first wave of the alien fleet emerged from the darkness, Evelyn felt a chill grip her heart. The battle for humanity's future had begun. The air aboard the Prometheus was thick with tension, the sound of rapid breathing and frantic footsteps filling the dimly lit corridors. The crew had gathered in the war room, their eyes fixed on the central display, where the vast, menacing form of the alien armada loomed larger by the second. Every ship, every vessel was a harbinger of destruction, but none were as dangerous as the Titan's wrath, the weapon humanity had unlocked and now had no choice but to unleash. Evelyn stood at the center of the room, surrounded by the hum of machinery, her hands shaking as she inputted final commands into the console. Her mind was numb, focused solely on the task at hand. This was it. There was no turning back. Behind her, Pierce stood silently, watching as the countdown clock ticked down relentlessly. The ship was already close to critical mass, the energy signatures from the Titan's wrath growing exponentially. The weapon was alive now, thrumming with untapped power, but Evelyn knew that unleashing its full potential would mean the end of everything they knew, the Prometheus, its crew, and possibly even their future as a species. But it was their only hope. "Ready to fire," Evelyn said softly, though her voice was barely audible over the rising hum of the weapon's core. The armada was close, too close. On the screen, their formations were almost perfect, a calculated precision that spoke of a strategy, as old as time itself. Take down the threat before it could reach its full potential. And humanity was that threat. "We've only got one shot," Pierce muttered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Once we fire this thing, we're committed. The Prometheus won't survive the backlash." Evelyn turned to face him. Her eyes dark with exhaustion and fear held his gaze for a long moment. "I know. But if we don't do this, they'll destroy us all." Pierce nodded, his face set in grim determination. "Do it." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the controls. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but she knew the truth. Humanity had opened Pandora's box, and now they were at the mercy of its contents. She input the final command. The room shook, a wave of heat washed over the crew, and the air hummed with raw energy. The Titan's wrath had activated fully, its power now unleashed across the star system. And with that energy came a violent pulse, a shockwave that sent ripples through space itself. The armada, hundreds of ships strong, had been closing in, but now they were caught in the weapon's wake. On the display, the fleet staggered, some ships veering off course as the energy pulse collided with them, frying their systems in an instant. But it wasn't enough. The weapon was powerful, yes, but it was crude. It wasn't designed for a long-range strike. It was built for close combat, for destruction at point-blank range, and even now, as the energy crackled through the void, the alien armada was closing in, relentless in its pursuit. "We need to do more," Evelyn shouted, her voice rising with panic as she saw the fleet's ships regaining control. "It's not enough. We need to overload the core." Pierce's eyes locked with hers. "Do it." With no hesitation, Evelyn began the sequence. The ship's power systems, already strained from the weapon's activation, began to overload. The energy surge intensified, flickering across the ship's hull. Every system on the Prometheus was at breaking point. She could feel it, like a scream inside the ship, a warning, a countdown to something terrible. Suddenly, the screens flickered as an explosion of light tore through the sky. A massive shockwave sent the Prometheus reeling, throwing the crew off their feet. For a moment, Evelyn thought it was the end. But then, as the wave of energy cascaded outward, she realized that it wasn't the weapon's destruction. It was the armada. The Titan's wrath had not only hit the fleet, it had torn through it, destroying several of the lead ships with a single blinding burst of energy. The fleet, once organized and cohesive, was now disintegrating in chaos. The remaining ships were spiraling out of control, some of them breaking apart under the force of the weapon's impact. And yet, Evelyn could still feel the pull of the weapon's power, still hear the hum of the core, still feel it thrumming, with the potential to end them all. The Titan's wrath was not done. Pierce ran to her side, his face filled with dread. "We need to shut it down now. If we don't, it'll consume everything." But Evelyn, her heart racing, knew it was too late. There was no shutting it down, not now. The weapon had tasted its power, and it was hungry. Destruction had become its purpose, and it had no intention of stopping. The Prometheus was shaking violently, the ship groaning under the strain of the overload. Sparks flew from consoles, and alarms blared. The crew was running, shouting to one another, but there was no escape. The weapon's core was reaching its critical mass. The pulse generators hummed louder now, as if in defiance, as if to remind them all of the price they had paid. The remaining alien ships were retreating, damaged beyond recognition, but Evelyn knew it was too little too late. The Prometheus had been caught in the weapon's wake, and it would not survive the final blow. "Evelyn," Pierce said, his voice low, and filled with a grim finality. "You did everything you could, you saved us, but we—" Before he could finish, the Prometheus shuddered one last time. The lights flickered, the hum of the weapon's core growing to a deafening roar. The ship was beyond saving. They had pushed the Titan's wrath to its limit, and it had responded in kind, destroying everything in its path. The Prometheus would be consumed by the very power it had unlocked. In that final moment, as the crew braced for the inevitable, Evelyn felt a strange calm wash over her. She had made the decision to unleash the weapon, to trust humanity's strength and resilience, to survive, and now it was too late to turn back. She could only hope that in some strange way, their actions would be remembered, not as a species consumed by its ambition, but as one that had dared to stand against the darkness. Then, the universe exploded into light. When the blinding light finally dimmed, the vast emptiness of space returned. The fleet was gone. The Prometheus was gone. But in that void, in the silence that followed, Evelyn's mind echoed with a singular thought. Humanity had survived, but at what cost? And as the last remnants of the alien fleet faded into the distance, something else emerged from the void. A shadow, a presence. It was not yet finished. This was only the beginning. The aftermath of the explosion felt like a dream, a nightmare that had yet to fully recede. The universe, once filled with the hum of power, now felt eerily quiet. The shockwave from the Titans. Wrath had wiped out the alien armada in its wake, but at an incalculable cost. The Prometheus, the last bastion of humanity's flee, was gone, a ghost ship adrift in space. But more than that, Evelyn realized humanity itself was standing on the precipice of a new era. It was almost too much to comprehend. She stood, staring at the empty void where the alien armada had been, mere hours ago, and wondered if the destruction had truly been worth it. The Prometheus was lost, the crew scattered, and the Titan's wrath was no longer just a weapon. It was an entity in its own right, a force that had not only changed the galaxy, but had changed humanity. It had altered the very fabric of their existence. Around her, the remains of the Prometheus floated, broken but not entirely destroyed. Some of the crew had managed to survive, albeit in small numbers. They had been on emergency life support systems when the final blast had hit. The evacuation pods had been launched at the last possible moment, but not everyone had made it. Evelyn's heart ached as she thought of the faces she'd never see again. Friends, colleagues, all lost in the destruction that had followed the Titan's wrath's catastrophic pulse. "Is anyone still alive out there?" Pierce's voice echoed over the comms, quiet but still recognizable. His face appeared on the screen. He was alive miraculously, though the damage to his pod was severe. Evelyn let out a shaky breath, her relief palpable but fleeting. "We're here, Pierce, I'm here," she said, her voice trembling. "The Prometheus, it's gone, but we're alive." For a moment there was silence between them, and then Pierce responded, his tone heavy with resignation. "The Armada's gone. We won. But at what cost? We're not the same. We'll never be the same." Evelyn nodded, though no one could see her. "No," she said softly. "We're not." She turned her attention to the remaining crew members. They had survived the blast, but they were stranded, scattered across the cold expanse of space. They had no ship to return to, no command to report to, only the haunting presence of the weapon they had unleashed, a presence that still echoed, in the silence around them. Humanity had not only uncovered the Titan's wrath, they had unleashed something far larger than themselves. It was no longer about survival. It was about understanding the consequences of wielding such unimaginable power. The Titan's wrath had done its job. It had eradicated the alien fleet. But it had also left humanity with a new moral dilemma. What was the price of victory? Could humanity continue on the path of survival, or had they become the very thing they had feared, the next great predator in a galaxy of fragile civilizations? Evelyn looked out through the viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. The destruction was vast, but so too was the potential. The universe had witnessed humanity's resilience. They had been tested, and they had not only survived, they had defeated an ancient enemy that no one had thought possible to defeat. Yet even in the shadow of that victory, she knew that their true test had only just begun. "Pierce the weapon," Evelyn said, her voice firm now, though it still carried the weight of the burden they had shouldered. "We have to make sure it never happens again. We need to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, even if it means destroying it ourselves." Pierce was silent for a moment. "You're talking about destroying the Titan's wrath?" "Yes," Evelyn said with conviction. "We've seen its power, Pierce. We've seen what it can do. It's not something we can control. It's something we need to bury before it consumes us all." The comms were quiet for a long time. Evelyn could hear the hum of the ship's emergency systems, the soft flicker of dying lights in the distance. The weight of her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Was this the end of their story? The end of humanity's journey into the stars? "I agree," Pierce finally said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We'll make sure it never sees the light of day again." It was a decision they would all have to live with if they could, but there was no other choice. The Titan's wrath was an ancient force, one that had been brought back into the light through humanity's curiosity and ambition. Now it was their responsibility to ensure that it stayed buried, its power never again wielded by anyone, even if that meant destroying the last remnants of the Prometheus and everything they had worked for. As Evelyn stared into the dark expanse of space, she felt the weight of that decision press down on her. They had survived. They had won. But at what cost? She had seen the destruction, the wreckage of the fleet, and the price humanity had paid to unleash a power far beyond their understanding. The silence of space was deafening. The stars glimmered coldly, indifferent to the struggles of those caught beneath their light. Humanity had won the battle. But what was left in the wake of that victory? Evelyn didn't have the answer. No one did. But she knew one thing for sure. The universe had seen what humanity was capable of. And now humanity had to decide what they would become. The comms crackled, breaking the stillness, and Pierce's voice came through once more. "We've made our decision, Evelyn. But there's something else. Something I didn't tell you earlier. There's more to the Titan's wrath than we've seen. It's not just a weapon, it's something else. Something we'll have to face." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, and then Pierce's voice came through, barely audible but clear. "We're not alone." The line went dead. Evelyn turned to the stars once more, her heart pounding. She had thought they had put an end to the nightmare. But now she knew the truth. The war had only just begun. Epilogue sequel hook, 500 words. The silence of space settled back around the survivors of the Prometheus. The weapon was silent now, its terrible power dormant once again. But for how long? The darkness of the universe seemed to stretch endlessly before them, and the question loomed larger than ever before. Had humanity truly won, or had they just awakened something far worse? In the stillness, a faint signal blinked across the remains of the ship's consoles. It was a message, buried deep within the Titan's wrath itself, a signal that had been dormant for centuries. And as Evelyn stared at it, her heart caught in her throat. She knew that humanity had not yet seen the full extent of the power they had unleashed. For in the silence of space there was something else. something ancient, something waiting. And they were not the only ones who had noticed. The story was far from over. The aftermath of the battle was marked by an eerie stillness, the quiet of space swallowing the remnants of the conflict. The Prometheus was a shattered husk of a ship, drifting in the cold expanse, yet its broken frame held the weight of the monumental choices humanity had made. The Titan's wrath for now lay dormant, a silent, deadly relic, its power hidden beneath the surface of the ship. The crew had made their decision to destroy it, to prevent any further devastation. But as the days passed in the void, it became clear. Some decisions could never be undone. Evelyn sat in the darkened remains of the bridge, the soft hum of the ship's emergency systems the only sound around her. Her mind was still processing the aftermath, the destruction of the armada, the loss of the Prometheus, and the reality of what they had done. The weight of their actions pressed down on her like the gravity of a dying star. They had fought, and they had survived. But what had they truly won? As she stared at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant stars, a soft beeping echoed through the quiet room. At first she ignored it, her mind still grappling with the emotional toll of the battle. But then it came again, louder this time, a signal. Her heart skipped a beat. Evelyn's hands moved mechanically to the console, her fingers trembling as she tried to make sense of the data. The signal was faint, buried deep within the wreckage of the Prometheus, something she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just a random transmission. It was a message, an encoded sequence buried within the core of the Titan's wrath itself. She leaned forward, her breath catching as she decrypted the signal. The message that appeared on the screen made her blood run cold. We know you are there. We have been watching. The Titan's wrath is but a piece of what you have awoken. There is more, much more. The true war has only just begun. The words were clear, and yet they carried an ominous weight. A chill ran through her body. They were not alone, and the implications of that message were far more terrifying than anything she had ever imagined. Evelyn's mind raced as she tried to process the revelation. The weapon, the relic they had thought destroyed, was only the beginning. The power behind it, the force that had been manipulating events from the shadows, was far more ancient, far more dangerous than the armada they had just obliterated. Humanity had thought it was finished with the Titans. But now the truth was undeniable. They had merely opened the door to something far worse. She tapped the console again, trying to pinpoint the source of the message, but it was already fading, slipping away into the vastness of space. Whoever, or whatever had sent it, had already vanished into the darkness. In the silence of space, Evelyn's breath caught as she realized the full gravity of their situation. The Titan's wrath had been just one piece of a much larger puzzle, and the pieces were falling into place. Her fingers hovered over the console, a single thought running through her mind. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As the final remnants of the signal vanished into the void, Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. The universe had seen humanity's power, but now they would see something else, something far darker, far older, and it was coming, and this time there would be no turning back.